Good morning everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. So today we are looking at a very quite interesting topic, which is what we call the biological species concept. So what is this about? So you might wonder, why is it that a very small dog such as a Chiweenie cannot interbreed with a big dog such as a Boabo? So this is what we are looking at. Now, we cannot look at the biological species concept without describing what the species is. So a species is a group of organisms having similar features and are able to interbreed to give what we call fertile offsprings. So now, when we look at this, we are now looking at what we call isolation. Isolation simply means mechanisms that prevents organisms of similar features to interbreed. So now, when we look at this, it can be split into two, which is the pre-zygotic isolation. Under pre-zygotic isolation, this occurs before what we call fertilization. So in other words, this occurs without fertilization, what prevents certain organisms from undergoing isolation. So now, the first thing that we are going to look at is what we call temporal isolation. So what is this? Just as the word entails, temporal isolation simply refers to a situation whereby organisms of similar species are failing because they met at different times. Like for example, if you look at the picture here, you will realize to say there is the Fuller toad and the American toad. So the Fuller toad begins to mate late summer, while the American toad mates early summer. These might look like very similar species, but because of that they fail to interbreed because they met at different times. So now, these organisms that fail to mate at the same time, they are liable to undergo what we call speciation. So now, speciation is just the formation of a new species because these two cannot mate. So at one point, these might have been the same species, but with time they might change. So now, the other thing that we look at is what we call behavioral isolation. What is this? So behavioral isolation, this is another barrier. This as a result of organisms portraying different characteristics or rather behaviors. Like for example, every mate, like you will hear, let's say in rainy season, you will hear clocks or rather the frogs croaking where they produce a certain sound. That sound is to attract mates. Now what happens if those two organisms of the same species are now producing different sounds? The different sound produced will not be able to attract the other mate, therefore they cannot mate. Like for example, we might look at very similar birds. They look very similar. We have the eastern meadowlark and the western meadowlark. Now because these more like have got different behavioral patterns as well as the sounds that they produce, they fail to attract each other, therefore preventing fertilization, or rather preventing what we call reproduction. So remember, every time we are looking at this, we are looking at pre-zygotic for the first part. Pre-zygotic meaning before fertilization. So now, when we are looking at the other form of where this is prohibited or is prevented, we also have what we call mechanical isolation. Just as the word entails, mechanical meaning to say the physical act from taking place. Now if you look at this, at the beginning of my video I talked about a big boabo failing to mate with a Chiweenie which is small. This is an example of what we call mechanical isolation. This occurs because of the differences in the physical nature of the organism. Maybe the other organism is too big, maybe the other organism is too small. So that prevents the organism from mating. So now when we look at this, we also can conclude to say maybe they might have incompatible genitalia. When we talk about genitalia, we are just talking about reproductive organs. So here with me, we have a simple picture of a frog. So if you look at the frog here, we have two small frogs. Now here, this big frog, if he attempts to do the same to the other one, it won't work because it's too big. So their genitalia do not fit. So now, when we look at mechanical isolation, we should also look at gametical isolation. Now, this gametical isolation simply refers to the situation whereby the gametes fail to fuse. When we talk about the gametes, we are simply talking about the ovules and the eggs. So now, here we might have an example of where we see the picture. We have this small sperm trying to penetrate that this won't work. So this is mostly seen in, let's say, water bodies, in lakes, in oceans, whereby organisms just release a large number of eggs in the sea. Then the males produce sperms. So only those that are compatible will be able to more like fertilize the egg. So that is what we call pre-zygotic. Now the other thing that is very much important under pre-zygotic is habitat isolation. So this is very much important to know. Habitat isolation, this refers to the differences in the habitats. So other organisms fail because of the differences in the habitats. Like here with me, we have a picture of two foxes. So they are separated by a river, therefore their habitats are the same or are different. If their habitats are the same, they cannot mate due to the fact that they are found across different habitats. So now these results in the formation of speciation. Because these are found in different areas, they might even form a different species because they are not mating with the other one. That's the way it works. So now, when we away from that, we should now look at what we call post-zygotic isolation. So just as the name entails, post meaning to say after fertilization has taken place. After fertilization has taken place, there is a bit of the isolation. So here, you must be very careful in everything that I'll be saying. So now, we have most of them just begin with hybrid. So we have hybrid inviability. This is the situation whereby the egg is fertilized, the zygote is formed, but the embryo fails to form. That is hybrid inviability. Be careful with how I'm using the terms. Then we have the hybrid sterility. When we talk about hybrid sterility, we are simply referring to a situation whereby the hybrid is formed, the embryo is formed, and the offspring is produced. But the offspring is sterile. What do we mean by sterile? It fails to reproduce. It fails to reproduce. Like the famous example that we might have is the combination of the horse and the donkey to form what we call moo. So this moo is a sterile hybrid in the fact that it cannot reproduce. It cannot produce viable offspring. So now, away from that, we have what we call now hybrid breakdown. What do we mean by hybrid breakdown? So get the difference between hybrid sterility and hybrid breakdown. So here, hybrids are formed. An hybrid is just an offspring produced due to the combination of two distinct species. So now here also the offspring is produced, but the offspring produced is fertile. Now what is the difference? The difference is that the offspring produced is fertile for the F1 generation. When it is just produced, it is fertile. Now for the second filial generation, when those two offsprings try to fuse, they more like fail to produce fertile offsprings. It might happen in the second filial or the later generations, but the main thing is that the hybrid is breaking down in the fact that it is stopping, or it is failing, or reaching the point where it fails to produce viable fertile offspring. So now, the examples that we have on hybrid breakdown is the liger, which is the combination of the lion and the tiger. We have the zoos, which is the combination of the zebra and the horse. In this, we might also have plants. Plants are formed in such a manner as well. So these are formed now just as the way it is. The F1 might be okay. They might produce fertile offspring to begin with, but later on the offsprings fail. So now, it is very much important to know where do we have challenges in applying this biological species concept. So now, just a reminder, we defined a species as a group of organisms that are able to interbreed to give fertile offsprings. So now, the problem is, what if you're talking about organisms that clone, or rather that form their offsprings through asexual reproduction? So there, the biological species concept cannot apply, because it is only one parent that is forming the organisms. But the biological species concept work when two parents come together and they fuse to produce fertile, viable offsprings. So the other thing is that when we are looking at the biological species concept, it is very difficult to say this organism is of the same species. Why? Because of variation. Variation, in simpler terms, is just the change in how the organism is. Now, if there is such a change in the way the organism is, it is very difficult for you to separate it from the other organisms. Like, for example, if you look at, let's say, the toads that are in Africa and those that are in America, they might be of the same type, but it is very difficult because some organisms will have very distinct or different characteristics and behaviors as the others. So it is very difficult. So we have problems in applying the biological species concept there. Then, when we look at this, because two or more offspring, or two or more parents of different species, though similar, are coming together, it also brings about what we call inviability and infertility in the organism. So this is what we call isolation and the biological species concept. Thank you very much for watching my video, and I hope you would subscribe and like for more. See you in the next tutorial.